beautiful Mercantile Library in downtown Cincinnati. It's surreal to be here amongst our Urban Consulate family and guests. We're thrilled to have you joining us from home this evening, and though we can't wait until we're all able to be back together in physical space in cities across the country, it's just so good to be with you. I want to share with you that as you see our small but mighty group here this evening, we are all fully vaccinated, and accordingly, we are adhering to CDC protocols. So I want to give a very special thanks to the Asian American Cultural Association of Cincinnati for their support, including tonight's salon in Cincinnati's celebration of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. So the conversation that we find ourselves in this evening is huge contextually. We're back in the mercantile space after over a year, which feels amazing. And it is indeed Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And the context is both weighty and positive, and we'll cast a vision forward. But we don't need to go any further than recent attacks and hateful murders of 6 Asian women in Atlanta this past March to understand that Asian people in this nation have long been targeted based on their race. And the opportunity that lies before us tonight, the opportunities amongst a community of equity and action leaders and advocates are manifold. Tonight, as we usually do, we'll be reflecting, we'll be sharing and healing. And the work of shared healing is the work we want to lean into tonight, because to understand the reckoning of the long legacy of anti-Asian racism, we must also accompany that with an examination of the long legacy of anti-Black racism in this nation. And as my sister and writer, Alia Bilal says, Black Americans and Asian Americans have been intentionally bound up within a system of white supremacy, forced to compete with one another and staking our claims to citizenship and belonging in this country. So the context of our relation is fraught, right? So if we are indeed bound together in a system designed to divide us, what does solidarity look like in a way that shatters those poisonous relationship bonds and recasts the way we relate to each other, the way we heal together, and the way we share solidarity together that is bound up in love, bound up in healing, and bound up in a sense that our liberation, our freedom is interlocked. So today's conversation will feel a little different because it's a conversation amongst friends. Friends sharing their personal experiences of being human, but also the personal experience of interracial friendship, interracial freedom struggles, and interracial just connection, right? It's gonna be great. Looking forward to it. But before we get into this conversation tonight, we are absolutely thrilled to have a musical guest joining us tonight. You know, it's Urban Consulate. It is much in our style to open up and ground ourselves in some kind of artistic modality of expression. And so tonight, Stephen Shinji Whipple is a native of Tokyo, Japan. Stephen finished high school in Interlochen, Michigan. Okay, Interlochen. And went to college in Cincinnati, Ohio. He taught at Universidad San Francisco de Quito in Quito, Ecuador. And then he moved to New York to pursue a career in jazz bass. Steve was an established and in-demand member of the jazz scene in New York, as well as a touring member of Postmodern Jukebox, until the live music scene came to a halt due to the COVID-19 pandemic. When the pandemic hit, Steve founded MaestroMatch.com, a website for musicians to connect with potential music students over the internet, receiving international attention. Currently, Steve's work is a combination of recording bass tracks at his home studio for clients, producing his own music, accompanying outdoor dance classes for kids that his wife teaches, busking with a variety of musicians when the weather is nice, teaching bass and Japanese over Zoom, and freelancing as a Japanese English translator. You can find him at steveshinjiwhipple.com. And with that, so pleased to welcome Steve Whipple. Over to you.
Hello. Sorry, this might be a little bit awkward because I'm using the same microphone for the instrument, so I'm going to lean in and talk. So pardon that. So thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Steven Shinji Whipple, and as I was introduced, I grew up in Tokyo, Japan. And so yeah, the first piece I'm going to play is about, it's called the Minority Suite. This is sort of a different experience, but a similar experience to, I think, what some of us have experienced in this country. It was based on a racial profiling incident I experienced for being a foreigner in Japan. So it's another country. But I feel like it's a similar experience in that it was a land that I considered my home, but when the police stopped me for not looking like the others, not looking like the native people, it put everything in question, whereas there's these people that are supposed to be protecting me, but instead they're not protecting me, they're actually profiling me. And I think that experience is shared among people who've had that. So my piece, it's in 3 movements, and it's sort of the emotional landscape of an experience like this. And I think that some people might be able to relate. The first movement is the immediate aftermath, kind of feeling helpless. The second movement kind of goes from a sadness to basically you're angry. And then finally, I kind of borrow from the jazz tradition, which I've studied and I love, the tradition of Charles Mingus, the idea of protest, of, standing firm and directing energy in a direction for change and positivity. So that's the third movement. So piece in 3 movements, Minority Suite. Thank you.
everybody. I see hand snaps, we're clapping in the mercantile. So it's just want to thank you, Steve. I mean, you are in New York and you have just taken everybody in this space here and in Zoomland on a journey. The power of music to transport us. And it is such an honor to share in this new space and ground us in your music. Thank you. Absolutely stunning. So once again, I encourage everybody to go to stevenshinjiwhipple.com and we'll have a little extra dose of Steve's music when we transition to breakout rooms. We're really excited about that. So without further ado, we get to have this conversation now. I'm really excited to introduce all of our guests tonight. So let me introduce you to Sulin, Angela, and Ronnie. First, to my right is Sulin No, a native of Cleveland, Ohio, but she considers the world her home. Sulin is a writer, a marketing professional by day, and she draws on her hyphenated identities as Asian American, daughter of refugee immigrants, military wife, woman of faith, and world traveler to bridge divides and foster understanding. Sulin's an advocate. She's a community organizer and leader with Opal, a grassroots member-led community that organizes for social justice and is building feminist AAPI leadership in Ohio. Sulin currently resides in Cincinnati's Over the Rhine neighborhood, OTR, with her husband. And Sulin is also a dynamic addition to the Urban Consulate team, not only providing marketing expertise, communications expertise, but all around equity, deep dive, context and focus and perspective to all of our programmatic planning. So it is such a pleasure to sit and dialogue with you. Welcome, Sulin. Next up is Ronnie Ikina. Ronnie is a first-gen Filipino-American living in Northside Cincinnati with a beautiful Filipina-American wife and 3 amazing children, one of which I found out may be playing piano soon, maybe. Ronnie was born in West Germany, then went on to reside in Okinawa, Japan, San Francisco, New York City, and Cleveland before moving to Cincinnati to earn his Bachelor of Fine Arts at UC. Ronnie's father served 24 years in the U.S. Army, with Ronnie following in his footsteps with 12 years of military service, including a few domestic and overseas deployments to Iraq. Ronnie currently works as a senior integrated media executive with Urban One, a media network primarily serving the African American community across the country. Ronnie is on the board of AACAC, which hosts the Cincinnati Asian Food Festival, Asianati.com, and more, along with the National Association of Asian American Professionals, NAAAP. These experiences, along with being raised in the 90s and the golden era of hip hop and attending a diverse high school of 2,800 students where he was the lone Filipino representative, crafted the foundation to Ronnie's path in life and helped shape his approach to strengthening solidarity and the lines of communication essential to building community. Welcome, Ronnie. And very excited to welcome Angela White. Angela is a native of Hueytown, Alabama. She graduated from the University of Louisville with a degree in political science and later attended Northern Kentucky University, where she received her JD. She currently serves as in-house counsel at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. In 2019, Angela launched, I'll get it right. Sis, I'll get it right. In 2019, Angela launched Debateable, a platform that extends the benefits of academic debate from the classroom into the community. She is also a member of the National Lawyers Guild, an association of progressive legal professionals. And joining us in a little while will be my friend, my fellow co-host, Megan Trishler. Megan is a designer and spiritual leader who accompanies people who wish to deepen their journeys of faith and work for the flourishing of the city. Megan is a space maker who has a heart for working at neighborhood scale. And that passion has taken her to cities across the world where she's had the opportunity to collaborate on a number of participatory projects, both in rural and urban communities. Megan will be joining us in the second half of tonight's event to set the stage for our breakout reflections and discussions. What an accomplished group. What an amazing group of human beings before us today. So, you know, we always set the stage with a personal check-in in an urban consulate, right? Because we bring our full selves to these dialogues. So let's check in. How are you? Let's start with you, Angela. How are you?
I am well. I am so excited to be here amongst friends.
Yeah.
To have this conversation with friends. I think we all want to say that we're not academics in this space, but in the same vein, we think that our friendship is a testament to things to be learned and gleaned from in the current times that we're in. I'm excited.
Sulin, what are you bringing to the space today? How are you showing up today?
Oh, I'm excited. I'm thrilled to be in the same room with some people I haven't seen in a very long time, to have some conversations that I think are really important to have. Like Angela said, I'm not an expert in anything but my own lived experiences, but I've learned so much from just being friends with Angela and Ronnie, and I hope everybody takes something away of that too.
Beautiful. Ronnie, how you doing?
Blessed. Happy to be here, honored to be here. JP, which the audience can't see, invited me here, and I was just truly ready to be able to have some conversations about the things going on and all the different things that we have been dedicating ourselves to the community. I'm here to learn because I've known Sulin and Angela for a number of years, but we really haven't dived deep into kind of what makes us tick and what motivates us on a day-to-day basis. So I'm hoping that in these next 90 minutes or so, we'll really get down to the nitty-gritty. So
This is going to be fun.
Yeah, and so like, as I'm sitting here like, well, typically the way I lean into these dialogues is I'm guiding with questions, but really we are leaning into the dynamic of the relationship you have with each other to help explore what solidarity looks like at this level, at this human level. Mm-hmm. So I wanna kind of like frame it up a little bit and just ask you guys to take the conversation where you feel it naturally flows. And one of the immediate questions that comes to mind for me is, you know, Ronnie, in your bio, you beautifully take us on a journey that gives us a window into how you were shaped to be the person you are today. So let's talk a little bit about what were the underpinnings of your experience growing up that helped shape the dynamics that you now bring into your adulthood as it relates to how you relate across intercultural, interracial lines, specifically between Black and Asian. I'm gonna start with you, Ronnie.
You know, that's a very loaded question because, you know, I've been on this earth now for 4 decades, and I think living in a lot of different countries and cities in my life, but growing up as a Filipino, I would say my first 20 years of life, it was an identity, like a pursuit to finding identity. And I'm still there, right? I'm still trying to understand exactly what the purpose is on all measures, but I think from an Asian standpoint, I shared this with you all previously, that when I was in 6th grade, I had all black hair, living in Cleveland, long black hair, black painted nails. I listened to Metallica. In 7th grade, I flipped the script and I wore an X hat and an Africa medallion. And I didn't know what I was, right? In terms of from a racial standpoint. And I got into a lot of both self-identity issues growing up in Cleveland. You know, living across the world, I was still very young, but then it became a defense mechanism in high school. Once I hit high school, I got into a lot of altercations, fights. I encountered a lot of, you know, racial slurs and things of that nature. So it became more of a defense of, hey, I'm a Filipino. But I really didn't know what that truly was because I'm still very much a neophyte in understanding who I was as a mature adult. And so in college, I started pursuing more active organizations, the Filipino organizations, the Asian organizations, and really tried to, understand and be proud of being Filipino. And then I took on leadership roles, and really that's where I met my wife. And I always said to myself, I want to marry a Filipino woman. And it's very difficult in the Midwest because, there's not a lot of us here. Another thing I always say is, like, I often look from the outside in, because when they say diversity in the Midwest, especially in Cincinnati, it's black and white. And Filipinos and Asians alike, a lot of times we sit in the background and we're like, okay, where do we fit in? But I'll leave it at that, because I know there's a lot in my experiences growing up to understand really what Filipino is, what being Asian is, and especially now with all the issues going on with Asian hate crimes, this is really necessary, and I appreciate, the Urban Consulate putting this together. So,
Thank you for being here. Sulin, I want to pose that same question to you.
Yeah, I think a lot of Ronnie's experiences hold true for me too, especially since I grew up in the Midwest, in a small town in Ohio near Cleveland, which was very affluent. Our parents moved there for the schools, but at the same time, it wasn't very diverse. And, as you were talking, Ronnie, I was thinking a lot about how far I've come in developing my identity and like claiming my identity, right? Because as a kid, I just wanted to disappear, right? And my parents, they're immigrants, they don't speak the language, they're in this new country, and it's black or it's white. The history that we learn is black or it's white. And so, the model minority myth is there, anti-blackness is there, and my parents, they're just trying to survive. They're trying to do whatever we need to do to be on the safe side so that their children can succeed in this new country. So for me, it was like, okay, well, Asian doesn't exist. I'm either black or I'm white, and one is better than the other. And I don't think I ever had a moment to think about being Asian until I went to college and I had my very first Asian American lit class. And that was like my first person of color teaching the class too. And it just blew my mind, like, oh, I don't have to follow this, whatever this minority model myth is telling me to do. Like, I need to be a doctor, or I need to play the violin or play tennis, or like do all the things. I can be a writer, which is what I've always wanted to do. I can't, people have laid the groundwork. So anyway, all this to say is, it's been a real journey to come to this point where I can stand before everyone and wear this t-shirt that says I'm not your model minority, and say, this is who I am, and you can take it or leave it, but I belong here, and this is my space. So that's my life in a nutshell.
Tell us about your journey, right, Angela? What have been some of the underpinnings of your own upbringing and messages and things that you saw that shaped who you are today in this context?
That's so important in hearing Ronnie and Sulin speak about, finding themselves in their identity. I think we all have to find ourselves in who we are before we can even talk about creating, coalitions amongst our respective groups. So I feel like we all have our origin story, if that's no better way to put it, as superheroes in this journey. So I guess to think back to, I was born in Hueytown, Alabama, and from a very young age, the dichotomy of black and white was instilled in my family. We had 2 crosses burned on our lawn when I was a child. When I was 6 years old, I remember I found the first one and I saw it. And so from a very young age, I've had the idea of racism and what it is, and that there are people in this world who do not like me because of my skin tone. I was made aware of that at a very young age. And to Celine and Ronnie's point, it was, in my world at least, black and white. And there may have been Asian Americans in Hueytown, Alabama. When I was growing up, I don't recall because it was black and white. And the idea of of making yourself invisible, Sulin, I think that's so important to hear, because maybe that's why I didn't see it. But also I was a child, and maybe I wasn't meant to see it. But it was imposed on me at a young age that racism is real. There are people out there who do not like you based off of the color of your skin. And because of that, you have to navigate in this world differently. So we moved to Kentucky, and I don't know why, to get away from racism, we moved to Kentucky, but that's where we came. And we went to an all-white elementary school. My sister and I were the only two African Americans and minorities in the entire elementary school. So always being the minority made me feel as though I had to represent for all of minorities, or all Black people specifically. So we talk about the model minority myth. There was a stage in my life where I thought I had to be like this particular Black, not like that Black. And so I think we all have, had a coming of age moment where we realized that the things that we were taught because of white supremacy, how detrimental they are, and how we had to really unlearn those things in order to become the activists and the voices that we have today. So.
Well, I mean, just listening to the through line, I mean, you will obviously have each of you come with distinct stories, and yet there's this common thread of this like awakening. Like Paulo Freire talks about this in The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, right? And that the unprogramming and unlearning that you encounter, not just in academia, but like in life, right? You come to discover these things. So I'm curious, like, if you guys have some kind of sense as to what was the inflection point in your discovery about not just who you were as a person and blossoming into that, but your relationship to others as your own identity was flourishing and cementing. What was the inflection point where it became not just I am me, but I am we?
Okay, so can I start? And then okay, I'm ready. I'm ready because it was just it was a very like specific point, and it wasn't that long ago, unfortunately, because it was through our friendship. For me personally, I'm a Southern woman. Food is the way to anyone's heart, but definitely in the South, food is very important. It's how you build relationships. And I was at a group gathering that typically Ronnie is the person that throws parties, but he wasn't throwing this one. It was Tessa.
Okay.
Was throwing this one, and I happened to just sit by Sulin. We literally just happened to sit with each other, and she invited me out to get food, and the next day, and we went to get food, and we were just having a conversation, and she invited me to her house to get more food, and she just knew the way to my heart was through food, and it was through having conversation with her that it opened up my eyes to like just there is a world beyond the black and white dichotomy that I live in. I got through my own aha moment of being like, oh, there's beyond me, but as far as like beyond black and white, it was through my friendship with Sulin that I actually realized that there's more to what's happening than just between black and whites. So yeah.
I think Angela deserves a lot of credit because she is just like this very open and warm and friendly person. She comes to the conversation without any assumptions. You know, you are who you are what you say you are. And that was very like, it made it easier for me to talk to you because, you know, again, growing up in rural Ohio is mostly white. It was still black and white, but like black people were in their own little clique. Like they were always separated from the white folks. And so if I, by nature of, you know, the model minority myth or the anti-blackness that was taught to me, would always like hang out with the white folks. So entering black spaces has always been very intimidating. And I can't imagine that I'm the only person who feels that way. Just because like, I want to, but I'm afraid of putting my foot in my mouth. I'm afraid of like saying the wrong thing or, you know. So, you know, in every stage of my life, there's always been a Black person who's been like an angel and like taught me something new about myself, but also about like the horrors and the depth of like how insidious white supremacy is in this country. And unfortunately, you know, those friendships I had to learn, so those friendships didn't last. And so coming to Cincinnati, sitting next to Angela by chance, and having someone who was just like so warm and welcoming and would tease me mercilessly but not hold it against me if I messed up, was like really, you know, I'm so grateful for that experience because I needed to learn and you were willing to have those conversations with me.
Vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's interesting that you bring that up, but we were talking earlier about Myers-Briggs. Me especially a very predominantly E, and it's a very positive E, assertive E, as you end that ENFP per se. My profile is that I always want to bring people together, and that from birth till I know the grave, it's a very much a wanting of a community that's positive and progress. Because everybody knows our home is open to whoever until you prove me otherwise. And for the most part, everybody who vouches, hey, can I bring so-and-so over? Pre-COVID, we would have, 100 people at our house. And it was like the United Colors of Benetton, and the reality is, the real life us, we're very active in our communities with OPAL, with Debatable, with the different organizations I'm a part of because we want to make a difference. And I don't really have an epiphany where I was like, all of a sudden I just turned. It was just kind of like every time in the different stages of my life, no matter where I was, I always wanted to bring people together to learn from each other. And I think I learned that in kind of high school just because that's my personality. But it's interesting because I was the opposite. My Asian experience, because I consider myself more Pacific American, Pacific Islander, but I definitely am part of the Asian community, especially in Cincinnati, because I was called chink and everything, right, growing up, because that's what I'm put into that shell. But all my play family growing up, I had black cousins and nephews and uncles and aunties, and that's what I grew up in Cleveland. And I was the opposite. I like growing up in the hip hop era, I used to MC, I used to break dance, I used to do all that stuff. And then I learned a lot about conviction and activism and just standing firm for what you believe in because of those, altercations even. Because most of the people that used to attack me in high school, we were like 60-40 black-white, we're black folks. And so I learned how to, I guess, I don't want to say talk the talk because I don't want to generalize the way a specific race talks, but that's the community that I grew up in, you know what I mean? And I used to, when I switched over from being enlisted in the Army to the officer world, I went to my brother because he grew up in the same high school, 5 years older than me, but he had a lot of white, all his friends were white. And I specifically went to him and I said, how do you talk to white people? Like, I didn't know at that time. But now being in this capacity I am from a career standpoint and just being a lot more mature and having kids and being more part of the community, I've learned how to really just take this wanting to make a difference beyond just having fun, but actually doing things that are going to progress our community and just being as open-armed to everybody as possible that I know are going to continue to spread that love for, not to be cliche, but you know what I mean? So I don't know if there was really an epiphany that told me to like, oh, all of a sudden I'm like, it's just kind of my essence, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm again, completely distinct stories, and yet another theme is emerging, and that is you're all connectors, right? And bridge building people. And the bridge building just may have happened at a different stage of your life and for different reasons, but fundamentally, at your core is a humility, is an openness, is a spirit and ethos of leaning into the learning, right? And it may have happened in different phases of your life, but leaning into that work brings you to where you are today. So this is where I'm looking to discern or distill, I should say, a little nugget of wisdom. So for people who maybe, and for no fault of their own, for whatever circumstances, but find themselves somewhat isolated, right? And perhaps don't have the language or the comfortability connecting with, if you're Black, connecting with the group outside of your race. If you're Asian, connecting with the group outside of your race. What would be one essential dimension that someone could use to lean into, creating friendships outside of your norm? What's the practical tip?
Why are you looking at me?
Throw big parties. Invite everybody.
So I do have to add this one little context. So the first way I was introduced to Ronnie Akina was like, oh, everybody knows Ronnie because Ronnie throws all the best parties and Ronnie knows everybody. So yeah.
Well, I don't know if I have an answer to tell somebody how to be. I think us as agents of change need to continue to be proactive in meeting people and connecting people. It's different in the Midwest. When I lived in, California to New York, all the coastal cities, even Chicago in the Midwest is the only place that I think is very different in the realm that diversity there is definitely a lot of different shades. And there's a lot of ethnic ambiguity out there, right? Like, if I'm out there, people might think if I get darker, they'll think I'm, Latino or whatever. And in Cincinnati, I almost feel like I yearn for that. Like my wife, God bless her, thanks for staying in Cincinnati, because I know she wanted to move to Cali or somewhere warmer for the most part because of Ohio having 4 seasons in 1 week or whatnot. But even more so, the fact that it's hard to truly feel culture and expression. And we're very like art driven. We want to be motivated by that because it all goes hand in hand, right? Like it's not just about race. I mean, it's a very deep subject, but when you have those experiences outside of just your standard Midwest, let's chug some beer and let's just eat some Skyline and talk about our sports. Like when you go out to these other cities and you experience different, cuisines and music and art, that elevates your mindset to say, I want to bring that back to this city. And that's why I continue to try to drive those experiences. And people who ever comes to our place or comes to an event of ours, if they decide to want to take that and expand their mindset or not, or just be there just to be in present, like that's ultimately very uplifting for me to witness them at least be like me being a part of ACAC. I'm so blessed to be a part of this organization that I've been trying to find my way doing something with the Asian organizations because I've seen a lot of silos, which our critical mass is so tiny here. I'm like, why do we have all like 20 different organizations that have all these specialties, which I appreciate, Opal. I'm not talking anything about you. But seriously, like ACAC, like our general mission is very, very generic. It's just we want to connect people and organizations in Greater Cincinnati that are interested in Asian culture and increase awareness about the unique Greater Cincinnati Asian offerings. That's it. And that to me, I want to, because I have such limited bandwidth with 3 kids and all the different things going on, that's why I devote a lot of time to that because, I want to be able to connect the Asian organizations and just the communities. And even as an action type of guy, like with Asian hate crime going on to the more darker edge, like I'm when I can get my hand in there with City Hall, with, the council members and with this mayor's race, I work closely with them in the career field that I'm in. Like if I can just throw a little dart in there and say, hey, don't forget about us. There's some things going on. We need to create a crisis hotline for Asian American hate or Asian hate, period. Like I was sharing this in another call, and I'm not gonna keep on going, but like my dad just moved in with us. My parents moved in with us in December. I love it, it's amazing, but he walks the neighborhood. He's stubborn. He's a 24-year Army vet, 5'2", 73 years old, and he thinks he's, can kill anybody. I'm like, dude, I can get jacked just walking. You see it all the time on the coastal cities right now. The burden will be on me if I witness that happening to you just a block away from our front door. You know what I mean? I shouldn't have to worry about that. So that's why, that side of it, where it's very serious to protect our community, I want to take action steps there. And then the other side of it, on the positive end, to try to create, this city that's going to thrive on arts, culture, music, just people wanting to stay here after they graduate from college. Because you hear it often. I think people's mindset is a little better now, but before they're like, I'm done with UC, NKU, Xavier, I'm going, to California, or I'm moving out of here. This place is whack, So I'm glad to hear people say, I love Cincinnati. All our friends that visit us, they love Cincinnati.
Something I say about this city, it's extraordinary because our history notwithstanding, we have an incredible opportunity before us to demonstrate what it looks like to be a city of equity, but a city of racial healing. And I believe that this city is poised to do that work so well and at scale, at levels of scale. I mean, it's a small enough city that with enough city builders, enough change makers banding together, I believe our city will be an example of what it means to move into a new place of healing and understanding that makes the city more vibrant, and then that makes the city one that people want to remain in. I'm listening to you talk about what it means to show up for the community, right? In your work with Opal, your work with Debatable, your work with Asian Addie. How do you show up for each other? And so there was a story, just hearing Sue Lynn talk about her relationship with Angela, and Angela, same for Sue Lynn. And you talked about how you both showed up for each other after George Floyd was murdered last year. And I'm just curious to know, what does that interior connection and bond look like that makes the bond far beyond just solidarity between an Asian person and a Black person? How did that show up for you guys?
Say that I did a lot of learning over the last year. And I mean, in a way, I'm a little embarrassed about that because I thought, coming into this season, yeah, I know that white supremacy is bad. I know the basic tenets that racism is bad, right? I know the building blocks. But I still had so much to learn from the perspective of what is it like to be a person of color watching someone like you experiencing violence. It's everywhere. It's on the news. It's all over social media. People around you are awkward. They don't know how to approach you, how to talk to you about it. So that was me during Black Lives Matters. I was that person where it was awkward. I didn't know what it must have been like in your shoes. It was overwhelming, just the violence of it all, as a person who wasn't Black, right? And so you being my friend, I was always thinking to myself, I was like, oh my God, what do I say? Mm-hmm. How can I say anything? I don't get it, right? And Stop Asian Hate, this season of violence against Asian Americans really opened my eyes to what it might have actually been like for my Black friends last year during all the protests. Because all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I get it. I don't want the Black square on Instagram, right? I don't want the hashtag. I don't want you to call me and ask me to lay out all of my pain for you to listen to, right? And so that was, in theory, I thought I knew, right? And I think a lot of people, I was just trying to be the best possible support for you because I knew what was happening was wrong and painful. But it really took experiencing this season of my identity being the focal point of social movements to get it, right?
Fair.
And I think something that you and a lot of our friends have done really well is hold space for me. And I don't know if I did that for you last year. I think I tried, but it's we are not comfortable being uncomfortable. We're not comfortable not having the right words to say or the things to do. I like to cook, I like to bake. My love language is like acts of service and gifts. So if I don't know what to say, I'm gonna give you all the food. Right? Yes. Okay, well, it worked, but you know, that's not necessarily what people need, because that was coming from like what I needed to do.
Fair.
Right? So I don't know if that really answered your question, but
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I mean, by that same token, like Angela, what was that experience like for you? Exchanging what, this
Yes.
time last year.
Yes. This time last year was heavy, I think, for a lot
Yeah.
of people, because I mean, we literally witnessed the murder of a Black man over and over and over again. That's something that we shouldn't have to see in general at all, but to see it as if it's like, par for the core in America, it just was so numbing after a while. I would say give yourself more credit, because I think we're learning together how to show up and differently. I think all of America kind of showed up differently. It was like I don't know if it was the pandemic or what was happening along with the pandemic, or just seeing 7 minutes of someone with someone's knee on someone's neck, plus being cooped up for as long as we were. But I just feel like in America, there was definitely a switch that flipped, and there were more people out on the streets protesting for justice than there ever had been, at least, in the past, I don't know, 5-6 years, maybe since, I don't know, the March on Washington. I don't know. I'm not an academic. I said that before. But, fast forward to the acts of violence in Atlanta that we witnessed. And now having to show up and hold space for Sulin in a way that I had never thought or experienced or knew how, because I've always been on the receiving end of people saying, how are you? I hope you're, another act of violence on the Black body in the media, like, how are you doing? I've never really was in the position to have to say, wait, how are you doing? How are you doing? But then this was a time where I had to stop and learn about just the history of racism against Asian Americans in America. And it wasn't this act of violence. There's been a history of violence, horrible violence against Asian American bodies to perpetuate white supremacy in America. So I've been doing a lot of learning myself. And how we do that with each other is that, we educate each other. And we hold space when we don't have the right words, but we just know that we're coming from a place of wanting to be better. And that's not to say to go to a Black person that you know and ask them to teach you how to be better. But we come from a place where we actually had a genuine friendship before all of these things came to fruition. So, yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of like, I would experience acts of violence or racism, not like physical violence, but I'd approach Angela and talk to her about it, and she would listen. And sometimes we don't get each other.
Say more.
Say less.
I'm going to ask
For the double click on that.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we mess up, right?
Yeah.
But
Well, but pause now.
Okay.
Only because, it's the messing up, right?
yeah.
That creates the bond. And because you guys have that shared desire to learn, you can call each other in, right? In a way that's, tending to each other, as opposed to calling each other out. That would only make you want to retreat.
I like how you phrase that. It's absolutely calling each other in. Because there are conversations where we're just culturally, I don't get it. Or I'll say something and she doesn't get it, and it just makes the whole conversation off. But it's like, oh, I share with her the song that I'm referencing for the thing I just referenced.
Yeah.
Or she'll share with me the history of the food that I am not culturally aware of, but it's significant because, like I said, food is a very important part of our relationship. Yeah, but it's very much calling each other in and it coming from a space of grace.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. And that's back to your other question. It has to come from a space of grace.
I was going to say, it's interesting too that, you know, the topic of tonight is Black and Asian solidarity. How do we get there? We look at healing and then this would have never existed without the friendship first. And so I've got friends that I met just purely off, hey, let's just drink or let's hang out. But then we have opportunities as our friendships over the years or over the months start going. For, you know, a lot of my friends are not Asian, but we start to learn about each other. And I guess to answer back to your question of like, what can people who are in their shell, in their certain cliques, you know, this is 1 degree of separation in Cincinnati. Everybody knows everybody, but they stay in their shells, right? Is I hear a lot of folks, when I meet them and I talk to them, they all the time have complaints. This sucks about this city, this sucks about race, this sucks about, so do something. I challenge them, I say, okay, you know, this is, I appreciate the feedback you're giving me. What are you doing about it? And because, you know, nowadays people, whether it's on the keyboard or amongst their shell of friends, they'll complain about everything. But I often think to myself, like, what are you doing to, so I challenge them to say, just come out to witness a urban consulate. Come to the rally that we had together as a community very quickly happen in response to Asian hate. Just be present. And then from there, take your steps that are necessary for your journey to make yourself more of a positive person to spread that love, I guess, is what I would say my you know. And the other thing I always think of too is, what's our struggle, how's our struggle different if we talk about Black and Asian solidarity? It's a very different journey too, because a lot of us, like, I'm a first generation. My dad didn't want to teach me Tagalog, which is our native tongue of the Philippines. He said, you're American now. And to this day, he's not like a belligerent Trumper, but he'll sometimes throw something out like, oh, Trump was a good president. There's a lot of Asians like that because they're single issue voters. A lot of Asians, especially Filipinos, if it's abortion and they're pro-life, highly Catholic, they're voting, period, that way. But they fail to see, when I talk to them about him walking around the neighborhood to be safe, carry your phone, I don't need a phone, they're not gonna bother me. I said, look, it just takes one person, and it could happen, whether white or Black, it could happen because this mindset has been positioned and perpetuated that Asian men are emasculated, Asian women there's a fetish behind them, and therefore they're weak, and let's go ahead and take advantage of them, especially elderly Asian people. And they fail to realize that because as first generations, we're now, as first generation Filipino Americans or Asian Americans, a lot of us that I witnessed in a lot of the different things I got involved with throughout the country, like I'm wearing my friend's clothing. This is a barong Tagalog, but traditionally in the Philippines, this was, as colonizers came in, these were clear so they could see if you had weapons or not. Now it's a business suit, but then we turned it black. Now it used to be white or clear, made out of piña, but we turned it black. My friend from San Diego has this company called Campeon because we're owning up to our culture and being proud of it, but putting the twist in the fact that now we're Americans, but we're not gonna let go of our Filipino-ness. You feel me? So, I don't know, there's so much going on, but we wanna make sure, because in Oakland, a lot of our friends out there in the Bay, that's where a lot of the stuff is happening, and a lot of the perpetrators are the Black community that are knocking down the Asian elderly folks.
Well,
and so, the televised. But I'm just saying, a lot of my friends there are forming bonds with the Black community to help have these, you know, these forms of solidarity and have their fists up, like, let's work together to avoid this and educate each other. And so,
I mean,
yeah.
like you said, Cincinnati does not have critical mass of Asian Americans. So if we were to organize, yeah, we are small and mighty, but like white supremacy affects us all.
Right.
Right? Like the police that were trolling the streets during Black Lives Matters, they followed my husband home, and he's Asian American. Like the model minority myth doesn't protect us. Anything that damages or oppresses Black folks damages and oppresses us too.
Amen.
Right? No matter what story they want to tell us. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, yeah, I'm gonna march with my Black brothers and sisters because at the end of the day, this impacts me too, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm gonna bring it back to that point about, you know, the division that selective media portrayal of Black perpetrators and Asians just continues to feed this model minority myth. It benefits white supremacy if we are divided.
I think that is the point, because the reality is there is violence happening in Oakland, in California, all across America, where the perpetrators are Black in some instances, white in other instances. What the focus is, and we talk about solidarity, but I don't know if for me the word is coalition building. The focus is bringing us together, Asians and Blacks, coalition building with each other, recognizing that the common enemy is white supremacy. And you ask, well, how is white supremacy causing Black people to attack Asians?
Systemic.
There's systemic, true. In the same vein, though, those individuals, once they're found, they're going to jail. There's no question about whether or not the people will receive justice. As opposed to when we're coalition building against white supremacy, we have to realize that not always will violence against minority bodies, whether you're Asian or you're Black or however you identify as a person of color, that systematically, it's not guaranteed that those systems are going to be inclusive of you, of us, and that the people who perpetuate violence against us in those systems will ever be held to account. So I think that, to your point, yes, it's a distraction in the media for us to focus on Black violence against Asian people, the same that the media wants to focus on black violence in areas of highly populated areas in Chicago without getting to the root of why all Black people are in those areas in Chicago to begin with. The point is coalition building across our communities, going back to Oakland, the Black Panther Party, there's coalition building there, all those 10 tenements of it, coming from Mao, which there's so much social things there. So I just think that there has to be a focus on the fact that we can build coalitions. Our issues are different, but they're very much the same when we're talking about breaking down white supremacy.
This is not a novel idea, right? We have a whole history of people of color uniting for different causes. We just aren't taught those stories, right? And so it becomes a story about like, we're divided.
And even on the same, you brought that up that earlier in the beginning of our conversation here, that, you know, when you first started, you know, you befriended Angela, that you had some there was a little bit, just some discomfort with talking in the Black community. I find that also a lot with, you know, when I've thrown some events where, like, quite frankly, it was at a Black club, and I had some people show up, Asian people, and they were just like, you know, the Vietnamese, they call it madang. Oh, there's too many madang here, I can't go. And I'm like, really?
What does that mean?
It means black people.
Okay.
But there's this, again, it is a kind of cannibalizing, self-defeating type of mentality, but it exists here that a lot of Asians that I meet get very apprehensive when it involves anything dealing with the Black community. And, you know, that's where I'm like, common denominators, come to one of my parties. You know, or just come to an event. Like, you'll it's a blend of so many different people. Just meet them at a very just surface level, like just friendships, and things will blossom through there. You know what I mean?
There's something really interesting about this conversation. I want to kind of bring it into a very personal thing, and then I want to get the last word from each of you. I'm a Black woman, last time I checked. Did you know that? It's true. And I interact with an entire community of Asian business people on a regular basis, because I have friends, but also because of this. I go into black serving beauty shops all day and stores, and I come in. Because I'm Naima, I'm like, hey. It's good to see you again. Can you tell me where I can get that Kinakalan? And what I want in that moment is a connection, because I'm more than a client. Like, I want to come in and like connect, and I want to know about you. Like, hey, Tell me, and I forged this relationship with the owner of the beauty supply store down the street from my house. Turns out kids played violin just like my kid. Kid goes to Johns Hopkins talking to my kid. You know, like that kind of, let's take it from the transactional and make it beautiful and make it beyond I'm giving you money for a service, that you can lean into that anytime you want. There is a dynamic there too, and there's a bigger part of like economic parity. Like what I would love to see is co-ops of Black business owners, Black women business owners who have some supply chains so that they can build their own beauty supply stores too, because Black women, you're talking about $1 billion industry cut out of. What I would love to see is co-ops of Black, Asian solidarity working in the beauty industry to teach each other and help ourselves grow so that we can all flourish and all, like I see that like as an incredible place to, I don't know, build some community and build some closeness. Am I making it up?
Taking it beyond transactional, I think it's
Yeah.
like when you ask the question about how do we establish the connections that we have, and I will say when I told my mom I was doing this, she asked me, like, frankly, she was like, how did you meet Sue? Like, how did y'all become friends? And she was like, you didn't have any Asian friends growing up, and I was like, you're very much right, I didn't. But it was food. I go back to that.
It was a mutual friend.
It was a mutual friend. But I guess if I'm trying to say a takeaway for like how to build a friendship, I don't know. But in the same vein, I can say that for us, it was just coming without any unpacking our prejudice, unpacking the idea that Asians don't like Black people. Because I learned that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I learned that, but that was the perception that I got walking through this world for the 30 some odd years that I walked it. And then, you know, there is anti-Blackness in the Asian American community, and even though I didn't know personally any Asians, I somehow was able to get that information instilled in me. So when I met Sulin and I met others like Sulin, it was like having to come and unpack that or get that out of my system, that just because she's Asian, she automatically does not like me, because that wasn't true at all. She loves me.
But look at this, I mean, we're here together sharing space, and it demonstrates an evolution of on all levels, right? So I realized we could sit here and talk about this, because there are like 3 different cascades of conversation points that we could take right now that we don't have time for. But I just want to gather some sort of last thoughts from each of you. What are some things you're leaving this conversation with?
So I was thinking about that last question too, that we tend to talk about race, white supremacy, feminism, all the isms in like these academic boxes, right? And so like when I was saying that in theory I knew what racism looked like, I was thinking about textbook racism, right? I'm thinking about, you know, overall, this is bad. But what really brought it into focus was building a true relationship with somebody who wasn't like me. You know, I think it's easy to say, like, if you don't have Black friends or Asian friends in your life, then you should go make some. That's not enough, right? It's really great to go and experience other cultures and learn about them, but that all feels very textbook to me. At some level, you have to go beyond that and meet the people. Because then you realize that Asian Americans are not a monolith. Filipinos and Chinese, Vietnamese Americans are very different, but we get lumped together in a lot of different ways. And if you met us as individuals, you'd know that we're very different people. And similarly, like experiencing movements through the eyes of my friend taught me things that I could never learn in a textbook. So that is what I'd like people to leave here tonight with, is to push past the discomfort and like be vulnerable with somebody that you don't know, right? And see what you can learn.
Push past the discomfort.
Angela, what about you?
For a second, as I gather my thoughts.
You know, I just think of, when you say the word dichotomy, I'm thinking of now the realm of COVID has definitely, and this latest election debacle has definitely spread two different camps, where you have the folks that have kind of the old guard, keep it the way it is, make America great again, and no matter what, they're not listening to this, they're not listening to anything that's gonna raise their consciousness and be positive people in the communities that they're in. I wanna live on that other side. And I look at my 3 children, that's my inspiration. I said, I want them to grow up not looking at race as, I won't say non-existent, because you gotta respect what every culture brings to the table, but just embrace and be positive and just, you know, from Leon to Maya, from 8 years old to 2 years old to Nolani, we invite all types of kids into our home. We bring them out to share experiences. They're in the Cincinnati public school system that, you know, is diverse, black and white, basically. That's the dichotomy when I say you can go this way or this way. You can continue to be ignorant and crass, or you can learn to be, because that's the future generations to me. I want to be steadfast in how I am as a person and teach those values to my children. And hopefully, you know, we continue to build solidarity, period. Black, Asian, every ethnicity in the communities that you're in to make a positive impact. So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Last word.
So I would say what I want people to take away from us sitting down together as friends is to recognize that we all have a role we can play in building coalitions amongst ourselves. Although our fight may feel different, it is the same. We're all looking to break down the walls of white supremacy that has left us out of being able to really experience freedom, what that really means in the US and in the world. And I say that you can do that either by the Ronnie method, which is opening literally the doors of your house and inviting, you know, a friend or a friend in and getting to know people who don't look like you, or just one-on-one with someone who doesn't look like you, but you share a common bond over something. However authentically you can build that connection, to do that today or tomorrow.
Oh. So, look, hope has always permeated the air, the spirit, our ethos. It's always present. But this conversation here is yet another, I think, etch of hope as we talk about what solidarity, what unity looks like. So I want to thank you, Sulin, Angela, and Ronnie, for bringing us into the interior of your friendship, leaning into vulnerability, and helping us learn how we might also do the same to strengthen solidarity. So, thank you. Thanks to each of you. What a dialogue. We've gone over many minutes. I see Yemi back in the scenes, like confirming, yes, you are very, very late. But fear not, we will be making our transition now after a tremendous conversation that has come from hearts and souls and minds. Even when we feel compelled to maybe edge away and we feel a little uncomfortable, we lean right back in. I love how the ebb and flow of the dialogue can go that way. Now we are going to get ready to move into our breakout dialogue. But before we do, as promised, we want to welcome back Stephen for another piece. It'll give us some time to digest what we've just heard while experiencing some really beautiful music. And then I'm going to hand it over to my co-host, Megan Trischler, who will explain both the intention and format for the breakout part of the salon.
Wow, thank you so much, Stephen, for sharing your gifts with us. Really beautiful. And of course, thank you so much to Sue Lynn and Ronnie and Angela, and of course, Naima, for just a really enlightening, helpful, and hopeful conversation this evening. So it's wonderful to be here at the Breakout and be together with each of you. And thanks again to all of you for joining us. So as Naima said, this is the portion of our salon where you get to join the conversation. So we're going to take a minute here and just do a little head and heart check with ourselves as we step into this conversation for tonight. And if you've been a part of Urban Consulate events before, you know that we typically like to break off into breakout rooms, into smaller groups where we can have a little bit more conversation and get a little bit more vulnerable with one another. But we're going to do it a little bit different this evening. And we're going to invite you to enter one of two rooms. So I need you to listen carefully here as I set the stage for what these two affinity groups are going to be this evening. So there's going to be a chance for you in just a minute to self-select which room you wish to join. So listen carefully as I direct you into one of these two rooms, okay? If you do not identify as white and you would like to talk about how to build solidarity, join Sue Lynn and Naima and Angela and Ronnie in room number 1, okay? Repeat, this is not a room to join if you are white. If you want to talk about how white people can become stronger allies, then you can join me in room number 2. Okay, one more time for clarity. If you do not identify as white and you'd like to talk about solidarity, you can join Naima and Sue Lynn and Ronnie and Angela in room number 1. But if you're white, this is not a room for you. If you are white and you would like to talk about how to become a stronger ally, you can join me in room number 2. Okay, and you're going to have a moment. In just a moment, you're going to be able to self-select and move yourself to one of those 2 rooms. For some of you, this may be a little bit of a new experience, and it might feel a little uncomfortable to be divided in this way, but stick with us, embrace that uncomfortability for just a moment. We just want to encourage you to stretch yourselves and lean into something that might feel a little bit new. And for others of you, you may be used to these types of affinity groups. So either way is good. Our hope tonight truly is to continue what I think our guests have already so beautifully modeled for us by speaking from lived experience, listening well, holding space well for one another, and really looking towards hopeful solutions for strengthening solidarity across lines of race. So that is our hope, that is our intention for tonight's breakout rooms. So if you're unable to access breakout rooms, some Zooms aren't allowing that, no problem, just hang on and we will get you moved to the right room. But for now, we're gonna go ahead and invite you to move into those 2 rooms. JP's got those set up, and we're gonna do about 20 minutes or so of reflection and dialogue. So we'll see you back here around 8:50 for some final parting words. All right, so I think JP. All right. Well, like all urban consulate conversations, this is one that can't be completed in a couple of hours, but we do hope that you found something meaningful here tonight in our main conversation, so beautifully hosted and facilitated, and then in these breakout rooms, however short that they were. I hope that something has moved you or challenged you or motivated you in some way. And hopefully there's some learning that's happened as well. That's our real hope with Urban Consulate Cincinnati is really what we're trying to do is to bring about and inch along towards racial healing. And so I hope that there was something here that you took away from tonight. Before I hand it back over to Naima, I do want to just invite just a little bit more participation in the chat. Just sort of as we come to a close, if you could put it in a single word, if I could challenge you to do as such, how are you feeling? Just in one word, if you can drop that in the chat. And I'd love to just sort of do a check-in here as we come to a close. Okay, so some hopeful, well done, inspired, tired, hopeful, confident, a little frustrated, introspective, a +1 for Orlando, feeling curious, grateful, optimistic, positive, discouraged, hopeful, encouraged, a mix of stuff tonight. Well, I want to thank everyone for participating, particularly in the breakout portion. I know that that can be challenging, that can be awkward. You're in a room with strangers talking about complex things. So again, I hope that there was some courage found to just reach out across your comfort zone, across a barrier or boundary in pursuit of healing, in pursuit of what I think our guests have so beautifully modeled tonight, real, radical friendship. All right, Naima, I'm going to hand it back to you for our closing words.
Wow. Thank you, Meg. I'm going to lean into the vulnerability of tonight and say this is the first Urban Consulate talk that I'm walking away with far less closure, and I'm stirred in ways that I have not been in a very long time. And I share that with you only, hopefully, maybe to find some solidarity with you. These dialogues are never meant to be easy, and I think tonight we're walking away with some of the realness of that. So I want to just say thank you for joining. As always, if you are online, you can always follow Urban Consulate on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and subscribe to our email list. Yes, that felt like a really hard pivot, didn't it? That felt like a real robotic pivot away from some freighted discussion. I gotta do it though, I'm sorry. Subscribe to our email list at urbanconsulate.com for updates on future programs, including June the 14th. I'm excited about this, y'all. The Urban Consulate Cincinnati team, in cooperation with our partners at CET, in observance of Juneteenth, will host the virtual premiere of Urban Consulate Presents Liberation Story, again with CET, followed by an interactive dialogue. Our guests include Michael Kopaj, Dr. Tia Cherie Gaynor, Free, and Fannin Rucker. We want to hear from you in the audience tonight. What does liberation mean to you? Tonight's topic alone is going to provide a lot of fodder for that. Please share your responses and sign up at urbanconsulate.com/liberation. You'll see a link in the chat before you leave us tonight. We want to know what liberation means to you. And of course, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. through May, my brother, fellow Urban Consulate host out of Detroit, is hosting a virtual watch party followed by dialogue for his series, Urban Consulate Confidential, featuring candid conversations with Black city builders and change makers across the country, presented with Next City and Ford Foundation. Featured Cincinnati guests include Michael Coffey from the Racial Justice Fund at the Greater Cincinnati Foundation this Wednesday. You don't want to miss that. It's Michael Coffey. Come on, Cincinnati. You need to come through. And Eileen Cooper-Reed of All in Cincinnati next Wednesday. So you do not want to miss Mama Eileen next Wednesday. You can sign up for these dialogues at urbanconsulate.com /confidential. Good evening, everybody. Take care. Be good to yourselves. Thank you.